And we're live. Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the 114th episode of Authors Love Bookstores presented by A Mighty Blaze. I can't believe 114. It's so amazing. Thank you for being with us today. I am your host, Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. For the past 2.5 years, I have virtually traveled across the United States, Canada, and Great Britain with my partner, Joe Moldover, to support independent bookstores and the authors who love them. We do this by bringing to you conversations between authors and booksellers to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. Let me introduce you to our guests. We're joined today all the way from Idaho by 3 people in one screen. That's a new one for us. We've had booksellers and authors together in one screen, but never 3. So this is exciting on so many levels. So our guests today are, again, 3. We have Sarah Hedrick, who's on the left, and Sarah is the owner of Iconoclast Books in Hailey, Idaho. And just before we went live, Sarah mentioned that her bookstore has been in operation in various forms for nearly 30 years, which is such an achievement. Congratulations. That is not nothing to sneeze at, as they say. That is like a huge amount of work. And I know I imagine your customers are so grateful that you exist and that you put all this time and energy into being there for them.
So, I feel lucky.
Oh, great. Okay. And then we have our authors. In the middle, we have Alli Frank. And then on the right, I guess, making sure I'm doing this correctly, is Asha Youmans. So we're very excited to have Alli and Asha with us. They are the authors of Tiny Imperfections and the brand new novel, Never Meant to Meet You. Yes, you heard it correctly. They write books together. So we're going to talk about that. There's Tiny Imperfections. There's Never Meant to Meet You. I'm fascinated by the idea of 2 people writing one book together. It's hard enough to do it by yourself. So we're going to dive into that today. And interesting facts. So both of you have backgrounds in education, over 20 years each, teaching and administration. And you both live in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
And we're here today to celebrate your book, to celebrate the bookstore. So welcome for being with us.
Thank you.
So to our audience, if you have questions for our guests, please post them in the comments below the broadcast and we'll get to as many as we can later on. So Asha and Alli, tell us about Sarah's bookstore. Why is it so special? Because when we invited you to be on the show, it was like right there in the email. This is who we want to talk to, this bookstore. What makes it so special? Tell us about this place you're sitting in together right now.
Well, admittedly, thank you, Asha. The choice of bookstore really came from me because Iconoclast Books, like Sarah said, has been around for 30 plus years. And I have been in part of the Sun Valley fabric in the Wood River Valley for more than that. But so much of my life, when I was an educator, when I was a college student, when I was a struggling writer, all connected back to Iconoclast Books. And I remember coming in here so often and just thinking, maybe one day, I will have a book in here too. And, it's come full circle. And then when we were looking at all the amazing bookstores that you have featured, a lot of them are in urban areas, but there's something so beautiful and community building about a bookstore in a small community. And it brings together people of every age. Sarah always has, all the reading lists for the kids in the schools. And there's a connection that I wanted to make sure that we celebrated, because it's not, like you just said, it's not easy to have a bookstore for 30 years, but also
I want to cry.
To have one in a, that's a transient community and ebbs and flows with tourism. And Sarah has held so steady, being a really high quality store. So to be honest, I didn't give Asha much choice. I was like, we're doing Iconoclast.
That's okay. When I walked in for the first time just today, it felt like bookshops of my own childhood. I have to admit that I wasn't very helpful to set up for this interview right now because I got lost immediately in the beautiful books that Sarah has here. And not only that, but the small accessories that make you feel like they connect to the books around you. Puzzles and things for children, other little discoveries in every nook and cranny of the store. I asked when I walked in, I mean, there's that familiar smell of books that kind of took me back to my own childhood and the bookshops I love. But first thing I asked after saying hello and nice to meet you to Sarah was, when can we shop?
Focus, Asha, focus. We have a podcast to do.
I love the way that you describe the store as this center for the community where it brings people together, because that is like the beauty of a bookstore, isn't it? That everyone can find themselves on the shelf. Sarah, what drew you to bookselling? What made you want to open a bookstore all those years ago and keep at it?
Oh God. So, well, I as we were talking before the show, I came out here in September of 90, thinking I was taking one semester off from teaching in Boston. And I promptly fell in love with the area, going from a city to a place where everybody knew each other. And this was back in the day when places closed down for a full month, like October was shut down because no one was here to support the restaurants. So when the ones that were open, you knew everybody in town. And I was just really, really drawn to that. And I started working in a bookstore. I was taking the semester off, but I couldn't totally goof off. So I started working in a bookstore with a woman who ended up becoming a really close friend. And this really handsome and super, my husband was the smartest person I've ever met. And he could be really intimidating, scary smart. And he started coming in the bookstore. And he wouldn't, well, it's too long of a story, but years later, 4 children later, he's the one who started the store, Iconoclast Books in Seattle. He was here. He moved back to Seattle for a while where he had gone to college, was procuring used books for a friend who was opening a used bookstore. And he ended up with so much surplus that he ended up opening up the first Iconoclast in Green Lake. Yeah, the first one was 93 in Green Lake. And after a year, he packed it up and moved it back here. And his story is that he wouldn't ask me out back in the day because I had a real job, which I think I was making $7 an hour managing the bookstore for my friend. So when he came back, and he came here after college to be a ski bum and, support his sports, worked in restaurants and ski shops and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he moved it back, and the very first Iconoclast was below Perry's in Ketchum. And it began as rare, used, out of print, and some periodicals. And over time and many locations, all of the moves were about growth until the last 5 years. And I have definitely downsized. But it was just I don't know. I miss teaching, but I have so many kids in my life, and it's so satisfying in terms of the kind of people that come into bookstores too. We've had this huge wave of transplants since the pandemic. And I just recently learned, I probably shouldn't say this, that they're called COWS, which is California, Oregon, Washington. Have you heard this?
Oh,
yeah. That's the plural.
Oh, multiple, right.
And there's
writer here.
And it's people who had second homes and tons of money, and they could take over their second homes and get their kids in school here, fleeing cities. There isn't a house still for sale right now. And there's so much complaining about it, and this kind of snappy attitude of wanting everything immediately. And I spend my day, I don't see it. And can I swear?
Sure.
I always say assholes don't come into bookstores, period. I have the best clientele in the world. And what I see from all these new people here is gratitude. They're giddy that they live in a town that they can walk or bike to a bookstore. They have more time with their children. They're coaching, they're volunteering, because they're not commuting an hour and a half each way.
Yeah.
So I don't see that. I don't feel it at all. And bookstores bring people together. I mean, it's a magical way to spend your day.
And can I add one thing to that? Oh, sorry. Can I say one
please
last
go ahead.
thing?
Please go ahead.
because of where we live, we have all these huge mountains and rivers and this beautiful terrain that's very expansive, which I love because I like to feel small in the world of nature. However, one thing I love about Iconoclast is you come in here and it's very cozy, and there's nothing better than a cozy bookstore. Asha and I know some bookstores in other cities that, they're huge and the ceilings are very vaulted and they're gorgeous, but there's something about feeling enclosed or hugged in a bookstore, and that's what Iconoclast feels like.
That makes me happy to hear.
So it's interesting to me that all three of you have a background in education. And I wonder if you feel like you can sort of scratch that teaching itch when it occasionally arises by a place like a bookstore. Because there is this, you were saying, Sarah, that you're not teaching, but in a way you are, right? Because you're connecting people with ideas, you're helping them answer questions, you're helping them find them like where they want to be and discovering themselves. So I would imagine there's some element of book selling and also writing that perhaps services that sort of those echoes of education. Yeah,
I would definitely say they go hand in hand, for sure. I taught the youngest students at the school where Alli and I met. And before they're able to read, they're so enchanted by storytelling. It's not just reading the words and showing the pictures, but it's also putting your heart into the story and trying to convey feelings to the kids. And when you're able to work with children and spark that curiosity for books, it feels amazing. I mean, I'm just sitting here, we're close to the center of Sarah's children's section, and I keep looking at her rounds of books of early readers, remembering students that I would say, oh, I would recommend this book to this child because they're ready for Biscuit Loves the Park. And, this other child would love to hear Pinkalicious. I think that bookstores, books in general, and the people around bookstores are kin to teachers, for sure.
Absolutely. I can quote Pinkalicious until the cows come home. You get what you get, you don't get upset. I think something else that's enchanting is your new book. Are you going to hold it up?
You think so?
We love it.
And I'm not the only one who really enjoyed Never Meant to Meet You. I'm going to read some of the great feedback about the book. Let's see. Library Journal said, friendship and romance go hand in hand in this warm, engaging story. Publishers Weekly gave you a starred review and said that the book is an impressive feat sure to move romance fans and women's fiction readers alike, and that the story has rich, empathetic characters. Book Reporter says that the book is an emotionally real look at race, religion, love, and heartache, and the realities of parenting through it all. One of the things, and that's just a fraction of the great feedback. Congratulations on your great book and launching it into the world. I know that's a fraught time full of excitement and uncertainty. So it's a great pleasure to have this wonderful feedback, I would imagine. What I really liked about this book, well, there's a couple of things, many things, but I really loved how quickly I was invested in the characters. Like, I really wanted to know what was going to happen next. I was curious about the choices they were making. I wanted to see them, Margette and Noah, become better friends. I just found that these were people I could hang out with, go to Max's Cafe and have a pastry, and that their lives were real to me. And I imagine that that's what you want to hear as a writer, that the characters you've created, the story that you've put on this page feels real to your readers, feels true. At least I hope that's what you want to hear, because that's how it made me feel.
We take all compliments.
Can you tell our audience about the book? Tell us a little bit about the story of Noah and Margette.
Well, going to your point about the characters and wanting to hang out with them, it's funny because when we start a new book every time, I sort of have to, especially after Tiny Imperfections. I mean, it was our first go at it, and we fell in love with the Bordelon family. But I really had to pull Alli away from her relationship with the women of that family and get her invested in the next family we were writing about.
I felt like I was cheating on them.
We loved them. They really were people that we could imagine ourselves hanging out with, going to a coffee shop, definitely going to Sarah's bookstore, without a doubt. But people we wanted to get to know better and hope that they would want to get to know us better. So
I had a tough time at the beginning of of Never Meant to Meet You. I sort of liken the beginning of writing a new book like wearing tight jeans. Like, it doesn't feel good. I don't know if I like these. Like, I was complaining a lot to Asha about Margette and Noah. But to be fair, it was also, we started writing that book at a time where we were complaining about everything, because it was end of May 2020. And we were each other's bubble with our families. We wanted to write another book, but the creative outlets of being in life and observing life were gone. Right. And so it was a time, like, we were so, as was everyone, engrossed in our own worlds, that we're like, well, let's write kind of what we know, which is about a white Jewish woman and a Black Baptist woman, and how they come together as friends and how they deal with grief. Because through the pandemic, everyone was grieving something. And so we really wanted to look at grief, but we also wanted to look at the idea of, gosh, is everything funny eventually? Like, will there ever be a time where we'll laugh about the pandemic? Will there ever be a time that we laugh about, where we are as a country, all that stuff? So we basically had Asha, myself, kind of a sad time in the world that we knew we were all in on. And that's what inspired the story, as well as, I would say, really solidified and honed our mission as writers to joy and laughter, and humor, to be able to talk about difficult subjects, race and religion and love and heartache and privilege. That there are many wonderful books out in the world that use harder stories, trauma in history, to help, open up a new lens for people. We want to try to do it through joy and humor. We think that can be as much of an avenue to learn about different cultures and different types of people as drama can. So we worked hard to find the humor in kind of a depressing time where Asha got definitely sick of me because we were all we had.
Would you ever write about the pandemic? Like set a novel during it? Super fascinated by the books coming out that are now, they don't just refer to it, they are pandemic stories.
Right. I think we tried our best to even frame this book outside of the pandemic, because it was, I believe, in the middle of it was hard at that time. When Alli, approached me about throwing grief out there about how we were all grieving, I didn't really even feel it myself. I thought, am I grieving though? I mean, it's boring, and I'm home all the time. I just felt differently about it. I didn't feel the word grief, but it was there. It was there, and it took writing this book to explore that part of what I was sad about, what I had missed so much. My children's graduations, proms, college graduations, things that they had worked so hard for. And by proxy, I had worked so hard for. The graduation dress for my son's college is still hanging up in the closet. And that was sad. So this book, setting it outside of the pandemic, I think was a little bit easier to allow me personally to reflect back on, how do I shake this now?
I also think one of the things you did in the book was, when you're looking at grief, you have the maybe traditional situation that you think about, right? Someone passes away. And that's all I'm going to say. No spoilers here, but right. So there is a loss of that kind that is maybe what someone thinks of when they hear the word grief. But then you also have a character who is grieving. Margette is grieving the loss of her idea of what her life was going to be, right? And that's another kind of grief that I think perhaps parallels what you're talking about, what we all lost during the pandemic, was this idea of what life was going to be like, right? And it was very different. And I thought that was a really smart choice. It really helps different kinds of readers connect on all different levels of the book. I found that to be very successful. Another thing go ahead, please.
Well, and culturally, we're so terrified of grief in our culture. And so people are understandably grieving when someone passes away. But then this grief that comes around loss of family events or what you expect as an outcome, those are ones that people have to process much more their own, because if it's put out into the world, people are like, oh, suck it up, you'll be fine. So we wanted to really allow both incidents to have some weight in the story and see how the processing and the healing, because the books is much about healing as well, move forward for each character. And we hope that some of our readers have the experience of like, oh, it's okay if I'm grieving something that might be perceived as not huge. Like, that's okay. I can work through that. I can talk to someone about it. And it's all good. It all counts.
Well, one thing that really hit home very closely to me is I reread Tiny Imperfections after having read it. Was it 2017? 2018?
No, it was May of 2020.
No.
Yeah, that one was May of 2020.
Into the pandemic.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah.
Into the pandemic.
Okay, so I reread it regardless because, I have pandemic brain, which means I don't know what day it is.
We all do.
Rereading a book is, super simple. But, there different things jumped out at me. But then I read them back to back. So as soon as I finished this, I read the next one. And I have raised 4 children for the most part by myself. My husband passed away 14 years ago, and the 4 kids were between the ages of 2 and 12.
Oh, I'm so
sorry. I am down to one child at home who's 17 years old. And when she leaves for whatever, college or however she launches in a year and a half, people who empty nest complain to me. I want to sock poke their eyes out a little bit. I will have been parenting with children under my roof for 29 years when she leaves. And thankfully, I'm so aware of it. I've launched 3 other kids that I treasure every single minute with her. I did with all of my kids. So I'm hyper aware of how precious this time is. But both of these books are also children about to leave home, in both. And I cried so hard this time reading Tiny Imperfections because it's that much closer to my reality. And then the same thing, in the second book, this, preparing to launch a young man. So that kind of grief was so relevant to me. And I just want to say really quickly too, the teaching elements of the books, having been a teacher of young children, is so smack on. It was so much fun for me to just kind of relive some of these things. And anyway, that was my grief, and I'm not afraid of grief. I just signed up for a certification through the University of Vermont to be an end of life doula.
Oh, nice.
No.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Not that we enjoy grief, but somebody said to me recently about herself, I have a very comfortable relationship with death. And I thought, I do too. I wouldn't have phrased it that way. And I'm fascinated by that kind of a doula. I mean, we have these specialists that help bring children into the world. And, the same kind of tender hand holding, caring, not being afraid of, we need to help them exit. So Yep,
Boy,
I started in
wow.
January. Be a college student again.
Just for our audience, we're including links to buy both Tiny Imperfections and Never Meant to Meet You from Iconoclast below. So please check those out. Another thing that you do really well in this book is that you have these two main characters. As you mentioned, one is Black, one is Jewish. They have very different lives. And they, through their friendship, they find a way to share their experiences, discrimination, anti-Semitism. They also share their beliefs and traditions. And it was done in a way with such compassion and grace. As I read those passages where there's a scene when Margette goes to sit Shiva and doesn't know that the mirrors need to be covered, and she reaches to take one down because she wants to tidy the house, which is like, I understand the instinct so well. And there's other examples in the book where the two characters, they just have so much capacity to share who they are in an honest and thoughtful and forgiving way. And I thought, as I read this, oh gosh, I wish like more Americans were like that. Like more people had grace and compassion for one another's differences, had an open mind. And I wondered if that intention is just naturally who the two of you are, or if it was a deliberate goal on your behalf to create a connection between these two women that could potentially inspire other people to find a way to connect with others in the same vein.
I would say, again, being around young little people is just a big dose of truth that everybody could use. Because I can't tell you how many students have reminded me that I have a big backside. And that's okay. And they still love me for it. Teacher Asha, why is your backside so big? Why is your hair curly like that? Why is your skin so brown? I know they love me. And their questions never hurt me one bit. It came from a place of curiosity and wanting to know more about their own world, which I was a part of. I think that one thing that at the school where Alli and I taught, the teachers, the part of the team that we were a part of, they would say a lot, dare to make mistakes, and tell the kids, dare to make mistakes, you learn from them. But somehow when we are in front of adults, that is no longer a grace we afford them, to make mistakes and still love them, and still engage with them, and still give them a chance. Alli, I love what you say about being judged by that one moment, that one mistake in your life.
Yeah, well, we're in a place in our culture. I mean, I call it a gotcha culture. Like people are waiting for you to make that one mistake, judge you based on your one mistake, and hold you to your worst moment versus the multitude of other great moments and mediocre moments. And Asha and I are really concerned that young people, led by the example of older people, are retreating rather than reaching out because this concern of being canceled, of getting their hands slapped. And we want to push back on that and say that being curious about people that are different than you or just perceived different than you, because Asha and I really write about humanity first, and then race, religion, toenail polish color, whatever, second. And so we want to push back and encourage people, like, stay curious, ask questions, want to get to know people that are different than you. And if the person you're reaching out to has a negative reaction, that's on them, not on you. Don't let that deter you from staying curious about someone else. And so that's really our goal in our writing, is to show characters who are not only interested in people similar to them, but show the growth of being interested in people who are different than them, and then creating amazing friendships or bonds. Because I would say that is who Asha and I are at the core. Our friend group, our families, everyone is a mix of many, many things, and we're richer and we're more amazing because of it. No, but we really do believe that our lives are richer because of it, and so we want everyone else to have that great experience as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that part of your connection in your book, in your books, because I think it really matters. Sarah, I'm going to switch over and ask you a bookstore question. So 30 years of bookselling, you've done events. Tell me about author events that you've done over the years. Tell me about your favorite one, excluding those with Alli and Asha. Of course, we know those are your favorite, but other than your events with them, when you think when someone says, oh, you're at a dinner party and someone's like, tell me about your favorite author event, which is the one that you immediately comes to mind?
Well, I've been so fortunate. It's hard to get authors here because of where we are. Even Boise, there aren't a lot of huge names coming through like there are in major cities. But because we have the most amazing library in Ketchum, it's a Ketchum Community Library, or the Community Library in Ketchum. That is one of the only libraries in the country that is not funded by the government. It's completely community supported.
I didn't know that.
Yep, it's completely community supported. We have a thrift store in town that supports it. Fundraisers, donations. They also are in charge of the Hemingway House, where Ernest and Mary Hemingway lived. So they did have writer in residencies there, all kinds of amazing things. But we can do our own thing too. I mean, I do a lot of events with the library, and now with my store being so much smaller, all of my events I end up sharing with the library for the most part. But I've also been involved with the Sun Valley Writers Conference since almost the get-go. And I'm not the book vendor for it anymore, but I still attend that each year. So I don't even know how I would narrow it down. I mean, I developed a close friendship with W.S. Merwin, our poet laureate, Pulitzer Prize winner. He and his wife, Paula, they have both since passed away. But they lived on Maui, and they were our best customers. I mean, they called 3 times a week to order their books from us.
Wow.
You're in the presence of such unbelievable greatness. I was also very fortunate to become friends with Jim Harrison, who I think, is one of the most amazing writers ever, over the years, who also has since passed away. But oh my gosh, I've just been so lucky. I can't repeat the full story, but one of my favorite questions came from Ann Patchett. She was here several years ago, and I just think she's so amazing, and she's beautiful, and she's strong. She's a really strong person, but so eloquent. She wears her beautiful black pencil skirts with pumps. Like, I'll never be a grown-up like her. Like, with her, silky blouse with no sweat stains, and yet she's like stands up to Anne. She's really amazing. But she was really kind after the event in appreciating as an author and a bookstore owner that I'm there at night. Half the time I had been paying babysitters to watch my kids so I could work a 15-hour day and lose a lot of money on book events, and then have the author sit right next to me and never even acknowledge that I'm there. And that doesn't happen often, but it has. Darn me too. So Anne was really complimentary. I mean, she was here for Commonwealth. It was that many years ago. It wasn't for the Dutch House. But and I had all her back stock. I had, hundreds of books. But she asked me who the meanest author I had ever worked with. When she complimented me, I said, I appreciate the fact that you get it, that I'm here, with all your books or whatever. I said, because some people just don't. She goes, oh, who's the meanest author?
Ann Patchett's a gossip. She's a real person.
And I didn't even have to pause. It just came out, and I will not repeat that part. And her response was, oh, blank is a blank. And we had this total bonding moment over the fact that we both thought that this one particular author, she said she had to keep her staff. Oh, never mind. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna get in so much trouble. Anyway, I'm just so lucky. I don't know. I mean, I try to go to other people's literary festivals, and Montana is close by. There's a really amazing one in Colorado called the Literary Sojourn in Steamboat Springs. It's just a one-day incredible event every September, and I forged some really, really deep friendships with authors, especially when you see them when nobody knows who they are, and then all of a sudden 10 books later. I'm not answering your question. I can't.
No, it's great. This is exactly what we want to hear. I mean, we want to know who the meanest author is, but we will understand that for many reasons that information needs to be confidential.
Oh, so want to know.
We did have Ann Patchett on the show. And we put the link below the broadcast. So if you're an Ann Patchett fan, it's worth watching because she has a dog that jumps through a hula hoop in the middle of the interview.
Oh, where's my dog? Barkley. I have a better dog than Ann Patchett. Yeah, can I have him?
Barkley, come join.
And here my friend Kenny,
we love dogs.
Is watching the store. Is watching the
Hi,
store.
Barkley.
And I think we've had one customer this entire time.
I mean, how cute
Look,
is this guy?
This is Barkley, the bookstore dog. And he is the biggest tramp for attention. And every customer comes in, they actually think that they are his favorite person.
Yeah.
And I won't discuss what happens when this gentleman walks in.
Yeah, when the door goes, he's ready to go.
Well, it's not only a door, it's Nemo, I think. Is it Nemo? Hey! This is our very beloved retired, he's the most beloved retired teacher I've ever met. And one of the things that's really fun about this town, one of the good things that happened as a result of the pandemic, not at first it wasn't good, but the amount of young people moving back here because they needed to, but a lot of them have stayed because they have figured out how to work remotely or they've opened up something new. There's a lot of youth in town right now. And it's so fun because Nemo does come in every single day. You can go see him now.
He's whining to go.
Oh, no.
He's
like Happy Toes.
Hello.
He dances when Nemo comes in. And so watching, say, like mid-30s even, customers come in and they run into him and it's like they've seen, a rock star, like, Mr. Nemjek, you were my most favorite teacher ever. And he is here for Barkley and my youngest and for me every single day.
Wonderful. Asha and Alli, so I really have to know how it is you write books together. Like just out of it, because I said this at the beginning that my brain sort of hurts about it. I was certain when I sat down to read this book, I was certain it was going to be third person, 2 points of view, and you just went back and forth and back and forth. And one of you wrote one and the other wrote the other, and that was it. But that is not what the book is. It's one point of view, first person. So that's like harder than my brain would allow me to imagine. And tell us, because we have writers who watch A Mighty Blaze, all our shows. Do you outline? I read something about FaceTime is involved in your writing process. I want to know about outlining. I want to know about editing. I want to know what happens when you disagree. And I want to know, how did this partnership come to be? What was the moment that you decided, hey, let's write a book together? Like, tell us about this, because I know I'm not the only one who's fascinated.
I just have to say, I love that earlier you were using the word grace in reference to us, because I would say there's nothing graceful about how we came to be, and when you just mentioned outlining, I'm like, oh, that should be a good idea. Maybe we should try that sometime.
Okay, so no outlining.
So I'll start with how it came to be, because it's more an embarrassing story on my end, and then you can talk about how we actually do it.
Yep.
So Asha and I, as she mentioned, worked in the same school together, and we were on the admissions team together, and we had very similar sense of humor about the juxtaposition of the seriousness of the admissions process. And we're talking about 3 and 4 year olds. And we had a head of school who was a phenomenal educator, phenomenal. She was also Swiss, and everything was very serious.
Mm-hmm.
So we would all be very serious in the process. But afterwards, Asha and I would scurry off to her classroom and be like, "Tee! Oh my God, did you see that hot dad? Woo, smoking. Let's take his kid." So, you know, we saw each other's sides. And I knew Asha was a great writer because in our school, you had to write narrative report cards.
Mm-hmm.
And Asha's were so beautiful of how she wrote about kids and school.
Mm.
All Asha knew about me in writing was literally emails. I mean, nothing else.
A lot of emails.
A lot of emails. But then Asha left the school. I went on to co-found a school, but I was in Sun Valley actually helping my parents with something. It was a huge snowstorm. I had to take a bus from here to Boise to get on my plane. And this idea for a story about a Black woman who was the director of admissions to a private school. And she was the one that held the power and the keys to the kingdom that all the white people want in, which is a very reverse scenario than most in our country. Oh my God, that could be, you know, and
It's turned off.
that would be an amazing story. And it could be funny. So by the time I got to the airport, I was so enthused. I was so enthused by the idea, and I get really excited about things, that I called Asha. This was pre-Spring Awakening, George Floyd 2020. Called Asha. I'm like, "Oh my God, do you want to get together and like have coffee and talk all about race and education?"
And I picked up the phone and said, "Who is this?
Mm.
Who starts a conversation like that?"
Ineloquent, not pretty. So white, right here.
Yeah.
But Asha, again, generosity of spirit, not judging me at my lowest moment of judgment. She said, "Sure, let's do it." So we met for coffee, and 14 months later, we turned in our first draft of Tiny Imperfections. So that's how we got together with it was true ignorance is bliss. How do you write a book? I don't know. Just we went for it. And now I'll hand it off to Asha of how we actually did it and do it.
Yeah, to hear that it sounds hard to you and maybe to other people is surprising to us. We just sort of dove in and didn't know that writing in one voice was such a hard thing. I brought the idea up to my husband and said, "Hey, Alli, we got together and we're thinking about writing a book." And he said, "Oh, that sounds horrible." And I thought, does it? But for us, we're very social people. Being around schools, we've been immersed in thousands of families for 20 plus years. That having company and having team around you when you're writing something, when you're creating something, from mission statements to curriculum, it's something that we're both used to. And I believe we came to that part pretty naturally. Now, I describe the two of us as an eagle and a turtle. Alli is that eagle flying above the landscape. She is seeking out the path to the story, doing twists and turns in the air, and searching with abandon for the right way to get to the end. And I don't know how her husband lives with a person with such fantastical ideas, but she's never allowed to leave him. Thank goodness for him. But I am the turtle on the ground looking at the little details. Alli calls me a word nerd, which I love because it rhymes. I keep a Chicago manual of style with me all the time. I love wonderfully constructed sentences. The thesaurus is my best friend. And I also enjoy a bit of drama and acting. I like to get into characters' heads. I like to watch people. I mean, nosiness doesn't even cover who I am. I watch people and think, I wonder what they do for a living. I wonder what they like to eat. I wonder where they bought those shoes. I want to know about other people, and then I want to weave their stories into our stories. I think I'm sort of an actress too, so.
Oh my God, you're total actress. So, but on the day to day, because I'm the one that holds like the huge plot line and where it goes, and I have to get everything down fast. We talk all the time. Like you asked if we outline, we don't outline. We talk about life nonstop to inspire our thinking. Okay. Every time we're together in person, on FaceTime, whatever, the first 20, 30 minutes are just life. And that really gets us going, writing about life. But I'll sit down when we're starting a new story and just get 3 chapters down of the story. They're not pretty. I don't have the great emotional depth of character that Asha has. So we call it writing leapfrog. I send those 3 chapters off to Asha with a ton of questions about the people, the emotions, the feelings. Asha gets to work and I'm doing the next 3 and then she returns. So we keep going over like that just to get the book down. Mm-hmm. Here's the part that people are like, really? You guys do that? Is then probably 6 to 8 times before it goes off to our editor, we meaning Asha, because she's the actress, we read the book out loud, sentence by sentence. And there's nothing in our books, there's not a word, there's not a punctuation, there's not a thought, a dialogue that we don't both agree on. And that speaks to our mission to want to lead with the humanity of people, not the race or the religion or the feeling. So we have to agree. And it's laborious for sure, but that's how we get to, turning in a book that we both love, we both feel good about. And I'll let you talk to, because we do have, there's this for sure.
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that you don't probably have a comparison, but do you think that your books are, the editing isn't when a professional editor comes in and looks at it, that you've already done so much?
Yeah, that's a super great question. So to that, our editing process with our editor at the publishing house is actually very short, and they can't believe how tight it is and how little there is to do because we have gone at it over everything.
Well, that suggestion to read your book aloud is such an important one. I mean, I heard that from other writers over the years. I know I've done that with my work in progress. It makes such a difference just to hear what's on the page because it sounds so different. And it also comes alive perhaps in places where you didn't expect it to, or it trips up in places where you thought was fine until you heard it. So I love that suggestion. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Can I ask another question? I want you to drop. Well, so years ago, the bookstore partnered with Libro. I have to give my favorite people in Seattle a plug with Libro FM, which is an independently owned audiobook company. It's the exact same recordings as Audible, but we're not supporting Amazon in our listening. And in turn, if people sign up through the bookstore, we get supported. And they're incredible people. They do so much for us when the pandemic hit. Anyway, I listen nonstop. I rarely get a chance to sit down and read a book. But when your brain isn't busy and your hands are, cooking, cleaning, shelving books when no one's in the bookstore. So I listen to probably 3 books a week. I've never been this well read, like since partnering with them. And I am an audio snob as far as narrators. And both of your books were by Bonnie Turpin. But
she's great.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So she's incredible. And she's done a ton. I love too. I noticed in one of them, she says this book is performed by Bonnie Turpin, not narrated by.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And it's, in the old days when we really were listening to books on tape, I called them the sleeping pill. You know, we'd get on a road trip and I'd say, put the sleeping pill in, and I could sleep from here to Minnesota. Because they were so awful, because authors were narrating their own books, and not all authors should. Now, you guys both could. You know?
Asha could. I couldn't.
You don't think
Asha
so?
could. No.
Did that ever, was it ever posed, or how, and then how did you score Bonnie Turpin?
Stalking.
Yeah.
That's one way.
I'm all for it.
I think it's important to reach out to people that you admire and genuinely show interest and ask them questions about how they got into their own career. And when you find someone as generous as Bonnie was, you stick with them. I write to her, she'll write to us back. Just, how you doing? I'm doing good. Great. Your bills paid? Okay. Talk to you some other time. Being, again, a human relationship can get you a lot.
Well, and that's, sorry, I just want to say that is also part of how Asha and I operate. And just when you were talking about an author might sit next to you and not actually recognize you as a human being. Asha and I are in this to rise all tides, and, you know, to the people we work with, to be in relationship with them, not be like, check, you did our Audible. Like, we want everyone to feel a part of the team, of putting out stories that bring joy and laughter around hard topics. That's okay. And just to circle back to what happens when we have, Asha and I have had really hard conversations around race. And, how would something really be said? What would the reaction be? We've had hard conversations about, even writing different genders. And, I learned a ton in writing Tiny Imperfections with Asha, and she had to be very open and not judgmental of my questions or my pushback that might have come from some naivete or being stuck in my ways. But it was also really lovely in, switching into Never Meant to Meet You, that Asha had some really good questions and wonderings about Judaism. And when you're Jewish, people don't always see you as different because, like, oh, you're white. But it does define the ethnicity for Jewish people. So it was really wonderful for me to get to share that with Asha and see her learn more. And there were times I had to push back, but we have the grace to want to get to the place where we both agree, and then to be able to show that in our books. But, we both say and ask stupid things all the time to each other.
So just a reminder to our audience, we're putting links below to buy Asha and Alli's books from my Iconoclast, and this is a perfect time. We're coming to the end of our time together, so I want to make sure I ask for book recommendations, because I know that our audience always wants to hear what you're reading. So obviously, we first want to, again, say Alli and Asha's books, links below. But then, what are you three reading right now? What's on your bedside table, or what are you looking forward to reading next?
Well, I am a women's fiction and com writer, but boy, am I a super huge fan of urban fantasy and paranormal fiction. Sci-fi, all the dark things that go bump in the night, vampires, do it for me. I'm currently reading Faith Hunter's final chapter of the Jane Yellow Rock series, Final Air, 15 books strong. I love series. It's hard to collect them in book form because there are so many and so many of the different series that I read. I do depend on my Kindle a lot for those. But I love the creepy stuff.
I love that. I love that peek into your brain. That's like fascinating to me.
This is where example of we're so good of 1 + 1 makes one good writer, and Turtle and the Eagle. Asha has the attention span for series. I couldn't do a series if you paid me. I'm like ping all over the place in what I'm reading. So I just finished that I bought at Iconoclast. I just finished Carrie Soto is Back.
Oh,
And
I'm reading that now.
I'm about, is that what you're reading now?
I'm reading right now. Yeah, just started it last night.
Yep. And we need to talk about, because you had said, let's talk about when you're done.
Well, I said, is it okay to say that a book about tennis had too much tennis in it?
I know.
For me, that's not.
Yeah,
I'm just not a tennis player, so I was like, I guess I should have known that going into it. They would have a lot of tennis in it.
So I finished that, but now I'm getting my heartstrings tugged, reading Salido.
Oh, he's coming.
No,
we don't have a date yet. I shouldn't announce that.
Awesome.
He's best friends with Francisco Cantu, who was just here for the Borderland. And he was staying at the Hemingways, and apparently he called Javier and said, do you want a gig like this? You can stay in Hemingway's house and da-da-da. So there's no date, but don't tell anybody.
Okay.
I want to talk too, because he is good looking.
He is good looking.
So is Francisco.
But you do.
Okay. Sarah, what are you reading?
What?
I will say for Salido, I've really struggled since the pandemic started to read hard stories, and it is beautifully written and it's an amazing story. I had to be in the right mind frame for it. So the excitement and the joy of launching our book, I knew I had the emotional capacity to take on. I struggle with particularly hard stories about children are weigh on me. So I'm loving it and it's beautifully done, but I had to be ready for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up at the event with Francisco is that, you know, we have so much dialogue about children in detention centers, children on the border, children, but there has rarely been a platform for children to tell their stories. So the fact that this memoir is told through nine. Yeah, I felt that way too about reading Hamnet when we were in the middle of a pandemic. I didn't want to read about the plague.
Yeah.
And thankfully somebody said, Sarah, get over it. And I'm so glad I did. But I just started John Irving's new book, which I haven't read all of his, but A Prayer for Owen Meany will be in my top 10 books for my whole life. It's one of the only books I've reread more than once. And it's called The Last Chairlift. And it's tons of the similar themes in his books. You know, it's New Hampshire or, you know, New England in general. Of unusually small male character, a mute character, which is Garp. Like there's a whole bunch of things thrown in, and then it starts in the 40s in Aspen, so it's a ski town setting.
Yeah,
that was amazing. Jamie Ford's Many Daughters of Athong Moy was incredible. Starting with his fascination with epigenetics.
Yep.
I could try How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water. I'm going to get her name wrong. Angie Cruz Smith. It's Dominican. It's a female character from the Dominican Republic, and a sassy narrator and or performer. Anyway, I can go on and on.
Well, great. Thank you for those recommendations. So, Sarah, the last question always goes to the bookseller.
Mm-hmm.
So, please finish this sentence for us. Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
The heart of the heart that I get back from the community. I'm trying to say, I couldn't do this if I didn't feel such support and love and joy for my community. I don't know how to say that in one word.
That's it. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I feel really, really, really lucky. I was so close to moving a few years ago with one child left at home who came to me and said, you know, Mom, when your 3-year lease is up at the bookstore, I'll be graduating from middle school. Should we move? And I really want to go back to Boston. At some point, I want another city living experience. And I didn't go hardcore, but I put some feelers out in the literary world. Well, and I'm claustrophobic. I've been here a long time. I've been single a long time. so I'm starting to make some progress with like, I saw how cool that I have a really amazing go-getter kid that would move right before starting high school. Well, we ended up, her 8th grade graduation, we were in bed with hot cocoa watching it virtually on TV in May of 2020. And there has not been a day since then that I have not felt grateful that I live in Hailey, Idaho, because this town won't let you sink. And we could have been homeless, jobless, and anonymous had I made that kind of a leap. And it just totally turned me around. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so lucky I get to live here. You know, in this town that, you know, I wasn't deemed essential. I mean, you know, the bookstore wasn't, but I was sneaking people into the bookstore anyway and giving them a place that they wasn't the grocery store. I mean, people come in and just go, oh my God, and just linger because no one else was here. It was safe. And, you know, all these things. I mean, I could write a book just about the beautiful things that happened during the pandemic. And by virtue of being in a bookstore that is so involved in the community of nonprofits. And, you know, I did a lot of work with the crisis hotline. You know, anyway, I'm so glad I'm not homeless in Boston right now.
Here too.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a very special place there, and we appreciate all three of you being on the show today, talking about your wonderful new book, talking about this bookstore that I think we all agree is a destination. We all need to come to Idaho now and shop.
Thank you.
We can also shop online, actually, and that's a perfect question we just got from the audience. Sylvia wants to know, she calls the store after we go off the air. Can she get a signed copy of Never Meant to Meet You?
Yes, she
Absolutely.
Yes, she can. Yes, Sylvia, you can. Go call the store and order your copy. You probably can
and
talk
anyone
to
can, because the valley is so small that within a 1-block radius is my favorite bookstore, where I work out, and the grocery store. So anytime we need to swing by, we can do it.
Awesome. To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we certainly hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook to get notified about all of our other events. Or if you're not a Facebook person, you can hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out once a week and gives you the rundown of all of the shows and all of our interviews. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, live on the Blaze. Until then, be well and keep reading. And again, to our guests, thank you so much for being with us today.